Chapter 16 Japsy and Cemetery John. Wednesday, March 9th to Saturday, March 12th, 1932. On the evening of March 9th, 8 days after the kidnapping, a man called the switchboard. He had a message for Colonel Lindbergh, he told the trooper who answered. He'd been instructed to give it to no one else. The trooper patched him through to the house. Robert Thayer came on the line, but the caller still refused to reveal why he'd telephoned. He identified himself as Dr. John F. Condon, a 72-year-old retired school principal, athletics coach, and doctor of pedagogy. He added that he was deeply patriotic and, as such, outraged by what had happened to America's hero. That was why he had placed a letter in Bronx Home News, his neighborhood newspaper, volunteering himself as a go-between. In addition, he'd offered his entire life savings of $1,000 on top of the already demanded ransom, so a loving mother may again have her child, and Colonel Lindbergh may know that the American people are grateful for the honor bestowed upon them by his pluck and daring. Another crank, thought Thayer. Then Dr. Condon told him he'd received a reply to his ad, a sealed letter addressed to Colonel Lindbergh. Still skeptical, Thayer handed over the phone. Charles got right to the point. Kindly open the letter and read it to me, he said. Condon did. The letter, littered with misspellings and grammatical errors, began, Dear Sir, Mr. Condon may act as go-between. The letter reminded Charles what kind of bills the kidnappers had previously specified, and warned him again not to notify the police. Was that all? Asked Charles. No, said Condon. At the bottom of the note appeared some odd circles. Was this important? He asked. It was. The strange signature from the original ransom note had never been divulged to the press, and now here was Condon describing the very same signature. The note had to be from the real kidnappers. Charles insisted the doctor drive out to Hopewell immediately. It was a 2-hour ride from the Bronx, and Dr. Condon did not arrive until after midnight. He was shown to the Lindberghs' bedroom. With policemen everywhere, this was the only remaining private space in the house. When Charles saw the old man, he was doubtful. Dr. Condon looked like a charlatan to the flyer. with his walrus mustache and his old-fashioned suit. But once Dr. Condon had repeated his story and handed over the note, Charles quickly changed his mind. After a brief discussion with Breckinridge, Charles agreed that Condon should act as go-between and place the message. Money is ready, and the New York American, as the kidnappers had instructed. Additionally, he felt it important to hide Condon's identity from the press. It was the old man's idea to use the pseudonym Jaffe, based on his initials JFC, to sign the message. With Charles now focused on these new developments, Lieutenant Keaton took the opportunity to question the servants in the Morrow household. He'd he'd already spoken to and cleared those at the Hopewell house. He knew he'd have to keep things light and informal. More a chat than an inquiry. Insisting his questions were just routine, he talked with the butler, the housekeeper, the personal secretary, and others. He cleared all of them as suspects until he got to the downstairs maid, Violet Sharp. Tense and evasive, she made it clear that she resented his questions. "You have no business prying into my private life," she shouted. Finally, defensively, she crossed her arms over her chest and refused to say another word. Her uncooperative behavior aroused Keaton's suspicions. For the time being, though, he decided to leave her alone. He would wait and see if events with Dr. Condon panned out. The requested message ran on Friday, March 11th. That night, someone claiming to be one of the kidnappers called Condon at home. In a heavy German accent, he said he had seen the message and would contact Condon again soon. Before the doctor could ask any questions, the man hung up. The next evening, a note arrived at Condon's house. It instructed him to go to a deserted hot dog stand on Jerome Avenue, where he would find a stone on its porch. Beneath the stone would be further instructions. Like a character in a Cloak and Dagger novel, Condon followed the notes from his home to the hot dog stand and eventually to the main entrance of Woodlawn Cemetery. He stood there, uncertain what to do next. The heavy gates were locked. He looked up and down the dark empty street. Had he gotten the instructions wrong? He shifted nervously. That was when something white flashed beneath the bars of the fence. A handkerchief. It was signaling him from inside the cemetery. The doctor approached. "Did you got it, the money?" a man asked. Condon explained he wouldn't bring the money until he saw the child. Before the man could reply, footsteps came along the sidewalk. It was just the cemetery guard, but the man believed Condon had called the police. He vaulted over the fence and began running down the street. Despite his age, Condon ran after him. "Come back here, don't be cowardly." Incredibly, the elderly doctor caught up with the man in a nearby park. After grabbing his arm, Condon led him to a stone beach. Even more incredible, the two sat and talked for almost an hour. Condon noted that the man was muscular and clean-shaven and kept his hat pulled down and his coat collar flipped up to hide his face. His name, he told Dr. Condon, was John, and he represented a gang of 3 men and 2 women who'd been planning the kidnapping for a year. The baby, he added, was being held on a boat 5 or 6 hours away by air. Suddenly he interrupted himself. "What if the baby is dead? Would I burn if the baby is dead?" Condon went cold. "Was the baby dead?" he asked. "The baby is all right," John said. But Condon felt worry. He insisted on proof that John actually had the child. John agreed. He promised to send the old man a token, the sleeping suit from the baby, in return, and to prove to his gang that he'd tried to convince Condon to give him the money. He asked that Condon take out another ad in the Bronx Home News. It should read, "Baby is alive and well, money is ready." The men shook hands. Then Cemetery John, as Condon now called him, vanished into the darkness. Sunday, March 13th to Tuesday, March 15th, 1932. Colonel Schwarzkopf fumed. Why, he demanded, hadn't he been told about the secret negotiations with the kidnappers? He was aware he'd been cut from those whispered strategy meetings between Charles and Henry Breckinridge. But this, he believed, was nothing short of obstructing justice. They'd had the kidnapper in their sights, and what had they done? They'd let him stroll away scot-free. It was outrageous. The colonel's anger merely confirmed Charles's belief that his interest conflicted with those of the authorities. They wanted to catch the kidnappers, but his only concern was the safe return of his son. He demanded Schwarzkopf say nothing to his troopers about the secret negotiations. He intended to play by the kidnappers' rule. He told the colonel and keep his side of the bargain. That same day, March 13th, gangster Mickey Rosner, who'd been asked to leave the Lindberghs' house because Charles no longer believed him, suddenly announced to the press that he'd heard from his underworld contacts. The baby was safe and healthy. Nobody else believed him either. His associates, Spitale and Bitz, truly had been putting out feelers from their base in a New York City speakeasy. But so far they'd come up empty-handed. In fact, Spitale didn't think the kidnapping was a gangland snatch. This one, he said, was pulled by an independent. Rosner never relayed this opinion to Charles. Out in the Bronx, Dr. Condon did as instructed. He placed the ad in the home news. The kidnappers didn't answer. On March 14th, he ran another. Money is ready. No cops, no Secret Service, no press. I come alone like last time. Jaffsy. There was still no reply. Had something frightened off the kidnappers? On the 15th, an anxious Condon placed yet another ad in the newspaper, its tone begging. I accept, money is ready. You know you can trust Jaffsy. Wednesday, March 16th, 1932. That morning the mailman delivered a brown paper bundle to Dr. Condon. The handwriting on the address was unmistakable. The old man immediately called Henry Breckinridge at his Manhattan law office. Breckinridge arrived within the hour. As Condon watched, the lawyer untied the knotted string and peeled back the paper. Inside was a freshly laundered gray sleeper, size 2. Breckinridge telephoned Charles. Could he come to the Bronx and identify it? It was 1:30 in the morning before Charles reached Condon's house. He removed his disguise. A hunting cap and a pair of large glasses, then carefully examined the sleeper. It looks like my son's garment, he finally said, after directing Condon to place an ad in the newspaper. He telephoned Anne and told her about the bundle. Then, with the little sleeping suit in hand, he headed back out into the night and waited for the sound of her husband's car in the driveway. When at last he arrived, he handed her the sleeper and she pressed it to her chest. Anne knew almost nothing about the negotiations. Instead, she waited for news, cocooned in her bedroom. At times, the endless waiting overwhelmed her, but she made sure to hide her tears because Charles insisted she not cry in front of him. I have a sustained feeling, like a high note on an organ, that has got stuck inside me, she wrote Elizabeth. The time since March 1st has been all in one mood or color, no variation, no come and go. It is just that night elongated. She forced herself to eat, sleep, and look to the future for the sake of her unborn child. And she clung to the belief that her Charles, her hero, would bring their baby home. Betty Morrow, who'd been staying at the Hopewell house, thought it best not to tell Anne about the black crow that had flown in through the nursery's open window the morning before to perch on the baby's crib.